Out here, the mountains keep their own counsel. Evelyn Parker thought silence was all she had left until a rescued bobcat chose her door. They named him Ashen. Night after night, he stood watch, patient as stone, tender as breath. When a new caregiver arrived, his stare hardened, his body set between them like a drawn line. We told ourselves it was jealousy. We were wrong. The night he leapt, we dialed the police with shaking hands, then learned what he had seen long before any of us dared to look. Remember this. The snow had long stopped falling, yet the air still shimmered with its memory. Beneath the silent peaks, Ashen stirred from the shadows of the cabin porch. His silver-grey coat rippled against the wind, each muscle tuned to the rhythm of a world that spoke in whispers Evelyn Parker could no longer hear. He had come to this place broken and near frozen, drawn by the faint scent of wood smoke and the soft tremor of a woman's voice calling into the storm. She had wrapped him in an old wool blanket, her hands shaking, her breath a fragile cloud in the night. That was the first warmth he remembered after the cold. Now, years later, the mountains stood unchanged, but Ashen had become part of the quiet that lived between their walls. Each dusk he took his post near the window, eyes amber in the dim light, his reflection mirrored against the snow. Evelyn moved gently behind the glass, unaware that his gaze followed her like a vow. Sometimes Daniel Parker would watch them both, the woman and the wild thing, and feel a strange comfort in their stillness. He never fully trusted the animal, but he trusted the way Evelyn seemed to breathe again when Ashen was near. It was as if grief itself paused when the bobcat blinked. Ashen understood more than they thought. He knew the rhythm of Evelyn's heart, the scent of her sorrow, the echo of someone missing from her world. When she sat at the desk, staring at blank pages, he would curl beneath her chair, silent as the snow falling outside. Winter nights brought the howl of coyotes from the ridge. Each time Ashen would rise, ears twitching, tail low, scanning the dark as if guarding something sacred. Evelyn would whisper his name like a prayer, Ashen, and he would return, slow and calm, reassured that she was still safe. Daniel laughed once, saying the cat was more sentry than pet, but there was truth in the joke. Ashen was not tame. His calm was a choice, his loyalty a mystery even to himself. The forest called to him often, yet he stayed bound not by walls, but by instinct deeper than hunger. When dawn crept through the pines, Ashen roamed the perimeter of the cabin, paws leaving ghost prints in the frost. The air carried the faint trace of something new, strange perfume, rubber soles, a metallic tang that didn't belong. He paused, ears high, body tense, and then vanished back into the trees. That afternoon, Evelyn found him watching the road that led down the valley. His fur bristled in a way she hadn't seen since the storm years ago. She knelt beside him, running a hand through his ruff, whispering that everything was fine. But Ashen did not relax. His eyes stayed fixed on the empty bend. At night, he refused his usual post by the hearth. Instead, he lingered at the front door, muscles coiled, eyes shifting toward the sound of tires crunching snow. When Daniel stepped outside to check, headlights flared, an unfamiliar car climbing the hill. Ashen's low growl vibrated through the floorboards. Evelyn opened the door to greet a woman in a grey coat, smiling politely, introducing herself as Martha Lynn. The smell from earlier clung to her sharp, antiseptic, unnatural. Ashen moved between them, silent but unyielding, his body forming a wall of fur and instinct. Evelyn laughed nervously, unaware that a line had just been drawn. Later, as the mountains swallowed the last light of day, Ashen returned to his watch by the window. Inside, the new caretaker unpacked her things, her soft humming bleeding into the quiet. Outside, the bobcat's breath clouded the glass. His eyes never left her reflection. Something in the air had shifted, and he felt the change settle deep into his bones. Morning broke clean and brittle, the sky a hard blue above the spruce. Ashen woke before the house, whiskers trembling to currents no human could name. He crossed the porch in silence, toes whispering over frost, and tasted the air. The foreign scent from last night still clung to the road like a shadow that refused the sun. Evelyn moved carefully, favouring her healing knee, and the bobcat paced beside her like a grey tide. He knew her steps, their weight and rhythm, and he knew when they faltered. When she reached for pain pills, he watched her palm, then the bottle, then the cup, cataloguing the ritual the way a hunter learns a trail. By noon the quiet loosened, a car climbed the grade, tires crisp on ice. Ashen was already at the door, spine lifted, ears cutting the wind. Martha Lynn stepped out in a neat grey coat, smile bright and harmless. The scent around her was anything but alcohol, latex, a metal trace that nicked his tongue like a blade. Daniel welcomed her with a handshake and a checklist. Ashen did not greet, he occupied. He set his body between Martha and Evelyn without sound, the way water fills a low place. Martha laughed it off, calling him handsome. The laugh was too even, a metronome smile. His tail made a single slow arc, then stilled. Martha toured the rooms with polite approval, but her gaze landed on hinges and corners, not quilts or books. Ashen tracked her eyes, not her feet. When she paused at the old oak cabinet, her breath thinned, and the antiseptic note sharpened. He pressed his shoulder to Evelyn's leg until she moved her gently away. Afternoon light thinned to pewter. Martha brewed tea, measuring leaves with a nurse's care. Ashen sat close enough to feel steam on his whiskers, mapping the scents, her lotion, the tea bag, and a third note, bitter, chalky, tucked inside a small plastic vial in her pocket. He filed it where instincts keep their warnings. Daniel teased that the cat needed manners. Ashen accepted the scolding, but did not yield the threshold. When Martha offered a hand, he lowered his head and breathed along the glove seams. They smelled of something that silences. He did not bite. He stored the knowledge and stepped back with the patience of winter. Evelyn apologized for him, embarrassed by his vigilance. Ashen looked up at her, caught the tiny quiver at the corner of her mouth, the way grief makes new rooms in a face. He touched his forehead to her knuckles, then returned to his post, watching Martha's reflection slide across the window like a thin cloud. Evening gathered softly, but the house felt off by 1/2 degree. Martha moved with professional quiet, rearranging minor things, pill trays, dish towels, the angle of a table lamp, none of it wrong. all of it intentional. Ashen marked each change the way he marks a boundary, invisible to most, bright as fire to him. When coyotes called from the ridge, he answered with silence. He stood in the hallway, directly between bedroom and kitchen, an arrow notched and waiting. Martha's steps approached, unhurried, carrying the smell of mint and something colder. The fur along his spine rose, not from fear, but from recognition. She set a cup beside Evelyn's book and a second on the coaster nearest Daniel's chair. Ashen sniffed both in turn, then stared at the third cup, cooling on the tray, a cup for no one, yet measured and ready. Martha saw his stare and moved the cup to the sink with a smile that did not touch her eyes. He remembered. Night sealed the windows in black glass. Ashen took the long watch, ribs moving slow and even, eyes steady as coals. He listened to the new rhythm of the house, the honest creak of timbers, the hush of snow, and beneath it, a thread-fine sound, a zipper, a snap, the click of a small case closing where no case belonged. The third morning came with snow so fine it looked like breath turned solid. Ashen moved through it as if through smoke, his pores soundless, his eyes narrowed against the glare. The mountain felt restless under the white. Each gust carried a scent that didn't belong, thin as wire, cold as tin. He followed it to the porch and stopped. Inside, the house hummed with a new rhythm. Martha moved easily through rooms now, rearranging small things as if she owned their order. Ashen watched from the threshold, tail twitching slow and deliberate. He had begun mapping her footsteps, the intervals between each pause, the places where silence lingered too long. Evelyn wrote again, her pen whispering over paper. Every few minutes she looked up, smiling absently toward the window where Ashen kept guard. She didn't see the subtle way his body tensed each time Martha entered, how his ears tracked her even when his eyes did not. His stillness was its own language of warning. When Martha brought coffee to Daniel's desk, Ashen's nose flared. Beneath the roast and sugar, another note coiled something medicinal, sterile. He pressed close to Daniel's leg, low growl rumbling like a quiet drum. Daniel nudged him aside, laughing, unaware that instinct had just brushed the edge of danger. Later, while Evelyn napped, Martha stood over her with a blanket folded neatly in her hands. Ashen watched from the corner, golden eyes unblinking. The woman's face softened as she tucked the blanket, but the rhythm of her breath told another story, measured, cautious, waiting. He shifted, claws whispering against wood. Evening brought visitors from the ridge. Nora Hill trudging up the path with a thermos and her easy smile. Ashen met her at the porch, body lowering in greeting. He trusted her scent, earth, pine, a trace of wild honey. When she entered, his guard eased for the first time in days. Nora's eyes caught his tension anyway. "He's on edge," she said quietly to Evelyn. "Animals feel it when something changes in the air," Martha answered from the kitchen, voice bright and harmless. "Maybe he just needs fresh meat." The sound of the knife against the board was too sharp. Ashen's ears flicked, the fur at his shoulders rippling like a warning flag. That night, wind scraped branches along the roof. Ashen lay awake near the hearth, muscles taut. He heard soft steps cross the hallway, light enough to pretend at sleepwalking. A drawer opened, metal clicked, the hinge whispered shut. He rose, soundless, and followed the trail to the study door, now half open to the dark. Through the crack he saw Martha's pale hands moving in the faint blue glow of Daniel's computer screen. She plugged in something small and black, her breath short with focus. Ashen crouched, every nerve pulled to a single thread. When she turned suddenly, he melted back into shadow, heart drumming but silent. At dawn, the air inside felt heavy, as if the house itself held its breath. Daniel couldn't find his USB drive. Martha offered to help search, her voice calm, eyes too bright. Ashen prowled the kitchen, nose tracing the baseboards, where the faint scent of burnt plastic hid beneath lemon cleaner. The lye smelled sweet. Evelyn reached down to scratch behind his ears, whispering that he was acting strange. Ashen leaned into her touch, the tension leaving only for her. But when he looked past her shoulder, he saw Martha's reflection in the window pane, watching them both. The Bobcat blinked slowly, already choosing the next move. Night returned and the wind died, leaving a silence too complete. Ashen settled at the bedroom door, his body a barrier drawn in muscle and fur. Behind him, Evelyn slept lightly, her breath even. Down the hall, Martha's shadow moved once across the wall, carrying the faint glint of something metal. He did not move, but his claws unsheathed, one by one, answering the darkness that had finally shown its shape. Snow fell again that night, a thin curtain of white over the cabin roof. Ashen watched it gather on the porch rail, each flake a fragment of silence. He could feel the storm shifting inside the house as well. Evelyn's breath slow with medicine, Daniel's voice low, Martha's steps soft but never still. The rhythm no longer fit. When dawn cracked pale, Ashen slipped from the bedroom and padded through the hallway. Martha stood at the counter, pouring something from a small amber vial into Evelyn's tea. The sound was faint, like a whisper swallowed by steam. Ashen did not greet, he occupied. He set his body between Martha and Evelyn without sound, the way water fills a low place. Martha laughed it off, calling him handsome. The laugh was too even, a metronome smile. His tail made a single slow arc, then stilled. Martha toured the rooms with polite approval, but her gaze landed on hinges and corners, not quilts or books. Ashen tracked her eyes, not her feet. When she paused at the old oak cabinet, her breath thinned and the antiseptic note sharpened. He pressed his shoulder to Evelyn's leg until she moved her gently away. Afternoon light thinned to pewter. Martha brewed tea, measuring leaves with a nurse's care. Daniel only sighed, brushing snow from his gloves, unaware of the tension beneath their table. Later, Evelyn slept in her study, her head bent over a half-finished page. Martha dusted nearby, moving picture frames and small trinkets. Ashen's ears flicked at each deliberate shift. When the woman's hand reached for the locked cabinet, his body tensed, muscles drawing tight as bowstring. Martha stepped back before the growl left his throat. Afternoon dimmed early. Daniel drove to town for supplies, leaving the two women alone. Ashen followed Martha from room to room, quiet but constant. She hummed an old tune, the kind used to calm patients. When she reached into her bag and pulled a silver flash drive, he pressed closer, blocking her path like a living wall. She hissed at him under her breath, voice stripped of sweetness. "You should have been left outside, beast." Ashen blinked once, unmoved. He could smell fear behind the sharp tone, the kind that clings to guilty skin. Martha shoved the device back into her pocket and forced a smile when Evelyn appeared with sleepy eyes. Evening thickened into storm. Wind rattled the windows, and the cabin creaked like a tired ship. Martha insisted on checking the locks, one by one. Ashen followed, tail low, muscles humming. At the final window, her hand lingered longer than needed, fingers tracing the latch. Beneath her perfume was the faint metallic scent of a tool. When Evelyn settled in for the night, she lit a single lamp and read aloud to calm herself. Ashen lay near the door, his eyes reflecting gold under the glow. The story's rhythm softened her voice, but he heard another rhythm beneath the creak of Martha's footsteps, crossing to Daniel's study once more. He rose silently, following the scent trail through the corridor. Martha knelt by Daniel's desk, unscrewing the vent cover below. She tucked a small object inside a transmitter, blinking faint red. The sound was almost nothing, but Ashen caught it. His growl came this time, low and rolling. The sound of a storm approaching. Martha spun, whispering harshly, "Stop it, or I'll have you taken away." She stepped forward, hand raised. Ashen didn't move. His eyes locked on hers, glowing with a cold certainty. She hesitated, fear cutting through her practiced calm, then backed toward the door, muttering excuses about checking the fire. Hours later, when the storm quieted, the cabin was wrapped in uneasy peace. Evelyn slept again, Daniel still gone. Ashen sat in the hall, facing the study where the vent glowed faintly. Snowlight spilled through the window, painting his coat silver. The mountains outside were silent, but inside, the hunt had already begun. The wind dropped overnight, leaving the woods drenched in silence. Ashen stretched beneath the window, every bone slow to wake. The cabin's heartbeat had changed. The humans still slept, yet the air carried a tension he could taste. He rose, silver fur brushing the light, and began his patrol as dawn spread across the valley. Outside, tracks cut fresh through the snow boot prints, sharp and deliberate, leading to the back shed. Ashen pressed his nose to the mark and inhaled. The scent was Martha's, mixed with something oily, metallic, unfamiliar. He followed it halfway, then turned back toward the door. His instincts said watch, not chase. Inside, Evelyn stirred, rubbing her eyes. The smell of coffee met her before Martha's voice did. "Thought I'd start early," the woman said sweetly. Ashen lay in the hall, golden eyes fixed on her. She moved too lightly, voice pitched wrong. When Daniel entered, Martha smiled wider. Ashen flattened his ears against the sound. The morning passed in brittle peace. Ashen remained close to Evelyn's chair as she sketched. Outside, wind brushed the eaves, but he focused on the faint hum coming from the study vent, the same pulse that smelled of wire and heat. He rose and padded toward it, pressing one paw against the metal grill, listening. Martha's reflection appeared behind him in the glass of a picture frame. "You're curious, aren't you?" she whispered. Her hand reached toward him. He stepped back, tail low, muscles coiled. When her fingers brushed the vent, he hissed. She froze, then laughed too loud. "Silly cat," she said, but her eyes did not smile. Later, Nora Hill arrived again, snow on her boots, her face worried. She greeted Ashen first, kneeling to touch his ruff. "He's guarding hard," she murmured to Evelyn. Martha hovered near the kitchen door, listening. Nora's eyes flicked toward her, then back to Ashen. Sometimes protection means seeing what others won't. After Nora left, the light dimmed and the storm returned. Daniel checked the windows, muttering about power lines. Martha followed him from room to room, offering to help, her tone smooth as glass. Ashen trailed them both, silent shadow. Every time she leaned too close to Daniel, his tail lashed once before stilling. Dinner came late. Evelyn thanked Martha for cooking. Though the food carried a faint, bitter smell Ashen didn't trust. He refused the scraps she offered, retreating to the corner. When Evelyn began to cough softly, he rose and pushed his head against her leg until she paused. Daniel laughed, calling him dramatic. That night, thunder shook the mountains. Ashen's fur bristled as lightning split the sky. From the dark came the creak of floorboards, Martha's steps again, moving toward Evelyn's room. He slid from the hearth and followed, his body a silent wave of muscle. The door to the bedroom cracked open ahead of her. Martha leaned over Evelyn's bed, whispering something he couldn't hear. Her hand glinted with metal. The sound of a vial opening sliced through the quiet. Ashen leapt. The glass shattered against the floor, scattering clear liquid across the rug. Evelyn woke with a cry. Martha stumbled back, blood blooming on her wrist. Daniel rushed in, shouting. Martha screamed that the cat had gone wild. Ashen crouched between them, his growl a deep, endless note. For a heartbeat, no one moved the air thick with disbelief and fear. Then Evelyn whispered his name, voice trembling, and he turned toward her, eyes softening just enough. By dawn, flashing lights painted the windows blue and red. The sheriff's truck idled outside, snow swirling in its beams. Ashen was locked in the spare room, pacing in silence. Beyond the door came the hum of radios, the sharp voices of men. He waited, muscles tight, knowing the night had changed everything. Morning came grey and heavy, pressing the cabin in a muffled calm. Ashen paced the small spare room where he'd been locked, claws clicking once with every turn. The scent of metal bars and fear hung close, but his heartbeat stayed even. He could still smell Evelyn beyond the wall, her worry, her trust, her confusion. Through the thin wood, he heard voices. Daniel's low anger, Martha's higher, trembling one, and another voice, rough and unfamiliar Sheriff Tom Reeves. Ashen paused, ears twitching toward the sound. A new scent came with it, leather, tobacco, authority. The sheriff's tone was steady, asking questions no one wanted to answer. Evelyn tried to explain, her words thin with disbelief. Martha spoke faster, crying that the bobcat attacked her without reason. The sheriff asked about the glass on the floor, about the cut on Martha's wrist. Silence followed, broken only by the faint hum from the vent. Ashen crouched, eyes narrowing. The hum was still alive. Hours passed before the latch turned. Daniel entered, shoulders stiff, eyes shadowed. He didn't look at Ashen directly. "They'll take you for observation," he said softly, voice flat. Ashen tilted his head, reading the man's scent shame, regret, a trace of fear. He stepped back once, then settled calmly, as if accepting the choice. Outside, cold air burned clean. Riley Moss, the animal control officer, approached with a transport crate. Ashen's fur lifted, but he made no move. Evelyn protested, her voice cracking. The sheriff reassured her this was temporary. Ashen met her gaze through the bars, and for a moment, the storm inside her quieted. The truck moved slow along the snowy road. Inside the crate, Ashen's body rocked with each turn. The scents of diesel, pine, and unfamiliar humans filled the space. He stayed still, saving strength, memorizing every sound. The world beyond blurred, but his mind marked direction, counting seconds, counting heartbeats. At the facility, bright lights and antiseptic washed over him. Dr. Wyatt Patel met them at the gate, calm eyes behind fogged glasses. "I'll keep him safe," he said. His scent carried no deceit. Ashen allowed the gate to close behind him. The humans spoke in soft tones, unaware he understood enough of meaning. Days blended. Snow fell outside the wire enclosure, while Ashen lay near the fence, ears turning toward every truck that passed. At night, he dreamed of the cabin's fire and Evelyn's voice calling his name. The dream always ended with the smell of metal, the hum of the vent, and Martha's false cry. Back at the cabin, Evelyn searched for clarity. She found a smear of strange oil near the vent where the fight began. The sheriff ordered a closer look. Daniel, guilt heavy on his breath, helped remove the panel. Inside, they found the small black transmitter blinking faintly, its red light like a heartbeat in hiding. When Evelyn called the sheriff, her hands shook. Through the phone, she said, Ashen was right. The truth spread quickly after that. Martha's story began to fray. Inconsistencies bled through every word. The sheriff sent a team to the facility, telling Dr. Patel to hold the Bobcat until he arrived himself. That evening, Ashen felt the shift before it happened. The gate opened again, but this time the air smelled clean. No deceit, no fear. Evelyn's voice floated toward him, soft and steady. He rose, stepping into the open snow. The sheriff nodded once, eyes thoughtful. "Seems you earned a second chance," he said quietly. Back at the cabin, the fire burned steady. Ashen crossed the threshold first, pausing just long enough to scent every corner. Evelyn knelt, tears shining, whispering that she was sorry for doubting. He pressed his head against her palm, slow and deliberate, forgiving her the only way he knew, through silence, through presence, through staying. The mountains outside were silent, but inside, the hunt had already begun. The days after his return passed in slow restoration. Ashen moved through the cabin like a ghost rediscovering its shape. Every sound, Every scent was familiar, yet changed. Evelyn's voice was softer, Daniel's steps careful. The world had cracked open and closed again, and he was left to test the edges for danger. Outside, the snow thawed in streaks across the slope. Ashen followed the melt to the tree line, his paws sinking into soft earth. He could smell the pulse of spring moss, thawed bark, faint rabbit scent, but he stayed near the fence. Freedom hummed out there like temptation, but something stronger kept him home. Evelyn began writing again at her desk by the window. Ashen lay beneath her chair, his tail curled to her rhythm. Sometimes she would pause and whisper, "You saved me," her voice half to herself. He didn't understand words, only the tone, grateful, fragile, certain, and he blinked slowly, an answer wrapped in calm. Daniel spent his hours repairing what the winter had taken. When he hammered the loose railing, Ashen watched from the porch, ears twitching with each strike. Their uneasy bond had softened. Daniel now greeted him with quiet respect. Once, he even placed a hand on the cat's shoulder, a brief truce sealed by touch. At dusk, Nora Hill arrived, carrying a box of supplies for Evelyn. Ashen greeted her without tension this time. She knelt to brush his fur, smiling. "Still on duty?" she teased. The bobcat leaned into her palm before retreating to the doorway. Nora's scent was the only new thing he trusted without hesitation. Inside, talk turned to justice. Sheriff Reeves had confirmed Martha's confession. The transmitter had been part of a corporate espionage ring. Evelyn's name was cleared in full. Ashen listened from his corner as voices blended with the crackle of fire. He did not need details. The threat was gone, and peace was tangible again. But peace came with ghosts. At night, Ashen roamed the cabin while the humans slept. The study still carried the faint smell of oil and fear. Sometimes he pressed his nose to the vent where the device had been hidden, breathing in the memory. The past stayed trapped in metal, but instinct kept him watching. One afternoon, a soft knock echoed from the porch. A woman with a camera introduced herself, Catherine Brooks, local reporter. She asked to film a short piece about the heroic Bobcat. Evelyn laughed nervously but agreed. Ashen watched the woman's eager movements, her perfume sharp, not dangerous but loud. He tolerated it. During the interview, Ashen sat by the hearth, half in shadow. The camera whirred, capturing his stillness. "He seems so calm," Catherine said. Evelyn smiled. Calm doesn't mean tame. The bobcat blinked once, eyes catching light. The reporter shivered, though the fire was warm. Instinct speaks in ways microphones never capture. After they left, the evening thickened with rain. Ashen paced near the door, uneasy. His instincts, dulled by safety, stirred again. Through the window came a flash of headlights on the far road one, then gone. The scent of oil drifted faintly through the crack under the door. He crouched low, muscles coiled, listening. Daniel checked the locks before bed. "Old nerves," he said to Evelyn. But Ashen didn't settle. The forest was whispering again. Not danger yet, just movement. Something turning in the dark beyond their reach. He took his place at the threshold, golden eyes fixed on the line where rain met trees. As dawn bled grey across the hills, Evelyn found him still there, soaked and unblinking. She knelt beside him, stroking his wet fur. "You don't have to guard anymore," she whispered. Ashen looked up, meeting her tired eyes. He didn't know how to stop. The world had broken once he would not let it happen again. Rain lingered for 3 days, steady and cold, softening the last of the snow around the cabin. Ashen moved through the damp air like smoke, his paws silent on the porch boards. Each drop carried scent and story, and beneath it all, he found the trace of change. Something restless had returned to the valley. Evelyn wrote at her desk, the sound of her pen faint under the rain. Ashen lay near her feet, fur darkened with moisture. When thunder rolled far off, she glanced at him, smiling gently. "You hate storms," she murmured. He didn't hate them, he listened to them, the way the mountain breathed when the world forgot to. Daniel's hammering echoed from the shed, mending a shutter torn by wind. The rhythmic clang steadied the house, yet to Ashen it sounded like warning. He prowled between rooms, scenting each corner. The home was whole again, but instinct told him peace had cracks too fine for human eyes to see. When dusk fell, Evelyn lit a single lamp. Ashen rested by the fire, eyes half closed, pretending sleep. A sound beneath the floorboards stirred him, a small vibration, faint but alive. He pressed an ear to the planks. It wasn't rats or pipes. It pulsed like the hum he remembered from the hidden transmitter. He rose suddenly, moving toward the study. Evelyn called his name softly, thinking he'd heard the wind. Ashen stopped at the vent that once held the device. It was clean now, metal cold. Still, the echo lingered in his bones. He clawed the wood once, testing the air, and caught nothing but his own reflection. Later, Nora Hill returned for a visit, her boots muddy, eyes bright. She told Evelyn about a new assignment tracking wildcats in the next valley. Ashen listened from the stairs, head tilted. When she knelt to stroke his ruff, he brushed against her sleeve, smelling pine and honesty. She laughed. "Still the guardian, huh?" That night, a noise in the woods snapped the calm. Ashen's head lifted. His ears turned sharply toward the dark. Daniel opened the door with a flashlight, calling to see if it was deer. The beam caught 2 eyes far beyond the fence. Another bobcat, lean and wild, watching silently before fading into rain. Ashen stayed outside long after, scenting the air where the stranger had stood. The smell was familiar, yet not kin. It carried hunger, freedom, and something else he couldn't name. Evelyn's voice called from the porch, gentle, worried. He returned, wet paws marking the boards like prints of something untamed but loyal. The next morning was clear. Ashen followed the fence line while Evelyn hung laundry in the sun. She laughed as he brushed against her legs, leaving damp fur on her jeans. Yet his eyes never stopped scanning the tree line. The forest whispered to him again, a call older than the house or the woman he guarded. At twilight, Evelyn sat on the porch with tea, reading aloud from her new manuscript. Her words drifted over him like wind through grass. He stayed, though his heart belonged to the wild. She read. Ashen blinked, ears flicking at the sound of his story. He wondered if she knew it wasn't finished yet. That night, moonlight spilled silver across the yard. Ashen slipped out quietly, following the wild scent down the ridge. It led to the creek, where water whispered over stone. He saw the other bobcat again, a shadow mirrored against his own. For a breath, they studied each other, wild meeting tame. When he returned before dawn, Evelyn was waiting at the door, robe tight around her shoulders. "You scared me," she whispered, kneeling. Ashen pressed his head to her hand. He smelled the forest, still clinging to his coat, the edge of something changing. She smiled through tired eyes. "You always come back," she said. For now, he did. The days grew longer, the snow line retreating higher into the peaks. Ashen moved through mornings heavy with fog, the world wrapped in silver quiet. The cabin breathed differently, now peaceful but distant. He felt it first in Evelyn's heartbeat, in the way her laughter no longer echoed. Something beyond the fence was calling again. He spent hours tracing the yard, paws pressing new paths into damp earth. Every gust from the pines brought the scent of freedom, sharp, wild, promising. He would pause at the edge, tail twitching, then turn back. Each time, the forest waited, patient and certain, like a memory that had learned his name. Evelyn watched from the porch, book closed on her lap. "You're restless," she said softly. Ashen met her gaze and blinked, slow and steady. She smiled sadly, as if she understood too well. The mountains had taken before and given back, and she feared they might claim him again. Yet she never called him inside. Daniel noticed it too. He tried to distract the cat with tasks: a repaired perch by the window, a new bowl, a toy shaped like a rabbit. Ashen ignored them all. His attention was turned outward now, to the voices of the wild that threaded through the trees, each dusk like invisible wires of song. One night, a sound drifted across the ridge, a low call, half cry, half purr. Ashen froze, ears pricked. It wasn't threat, it was invitation. The same bobcat he had seen before lingered beyond the fence, her eyes catching moonlight. She blinked once, slow and certain. The space between them vibrated with recognition. The next day, Evelyn opened the back gate to hang laundry. Ashen followed her quietly, brushing her calf as he passed. For the first time, she didn't stop him when he stepped beyond the fence line. He turned once, looking back at her. Their eyes met in silence. Two creatures bound by different kinds of love. In the forest, sound changed. Wind bent through pine needles, like water through reeds. Ashen padded over roots and stones, muscles remembering what the walls had softened. The wild no longer felt foreign. It was rhythm. Still, a faint ache tugged in his chest, the warmth of firelight, the shape of a hand he'd learned to trust. Evelyn waited that night, porchlight glowing faintly. She didn't sleep, only listened to the coyotes, to the creek, to the silence between. Daniel found her at dawn, wrapped in a blanket, whispering, "He's gone." But she said it without grief, as if naming something inevitable. An echo finally released. Days passed. The yard grew quiet again. A week later, Evelyn woke to a sound on the porch, a soft scrape, a familiar breath. She opened the door and found paw prints in fresh mud leading to the threshold. He hadn't returned, but his scent lingered, warm and sure, folded into the wood like memory itself. When Nora visited, she smiled sadly at the prints. "Sometimes the wild calls them home," she said. Evelyn nodded, tracing one mark with her finger. "He was never mine to keep," she whispered. Yet every night she left the porch door cracked, a small offering to the wilderness that had once saved her. Autumn returned before she saw him again. She was writing when movement caught her eye, a flash of silver near the tree line. Ashen stood there, older, heavier, eyes bright with recognition. He didn't cross the yard, only watched, tail flicking once. Evelyn lifted her hand. That was enough. When he vanished into the forest again, she exhaled, tears wetting her smile. In the hush that followed, she whispered to the empty air, "Be free, my brave one." And somewhere beyond sight, the bobcat paused, turning his head toward the voice that had once given him a name. The mountains answered in quiet approval. Dawn came thin and gold, brushing the peaks like a quiet benediction. Ashen stood above the cabin on a granite shelf, breath fogging the cold. Below, smoke rose from Evelyn's chimney. He knew that smell: cedar, paper, a life rebuilt. The forest tugged at him, but memory tugged too, strong as sinew. He descended through lodgepole shade, paws sure on slick needles. Along the fence he paused, reading the yard like a page he had once learned by heart. Laundry lines idle, a tin mug on the rail, the soft trace of Evelyn's soap drifting upward. He touched the gate with his cheek and waited. Evelyn opened the door as if answering a thought, not a sound. She didn't call his name. She simply stepped aside and let the morning widen. Ashen crossed the threshold with the slow authority of rivers. Not a guest, not property, only something true returning to what had become its second shape. Inside, the house held new things. A stack of books stamped with Evelyn's title, a framed letter from Sheriff Tom Reeves. None of it explained the room, as well as scent did ink, ash, oranges, the unafraid salt of tears dried on wool. Ashen breathed it in, finding his place at the hearth again. Daniel entered with a board under his arm, paused, then smiled without forcing it. He set the board down and worked quietly, repairing a chair leg while the bobcat watched. Between hammer strokes, Daniel's hand reached once, brief and steady, to rest on Ashen's shoulder. Not apology, not claim recognition. Weeks folded into a clean routine. Ashen hunted the lower slope at dawn and returned by noon to sprawl in a ribbon of light across the floorboards. Evelyn wrote with a steadier hand. When her breath hitched, he lifted his head. When it smoothed, he slept. Their clocks learned each other again. A late storm rattled the valley, wet and heavy. The creek rose, gnawing at the bank behind the shed. Ashen felt the ground go loose beneath his pads and moved uphill, then turned, urging Evelyn forward with his shoulder. Daniel grabbed the tool chest as the bank surrendered. They gained the porch laughing, breathless, safe. Later, Catherine Brooks returned with a modest crew. She filmed outside, careful, understanding at last that some stories breathe better unboxed. Ashen watched from the doorway, eyes half-lidded. The camera loved him. He owed it nothing. When they left, quiet returned quickly, like a bird to a trusted branch. One evening, Nora Hill hiked in from the high ridge, boots salted with wind. She sat on the steps and told Evelyn about collared cats ranging east, healthy and cunning. Ashen listened, ears tilting to the map inside the words. Freedom wasn't a miracle. It was distance measured without losing the way home. Summer braided itself through the pines. Ashen ranged farther, sometimes not returning until the second dawn. Each time he came back lean and bright, wearing creek and sun. He found the door open and a clean bowl nearby. Evelyn never waited on the steps anymore. Waiting had become a kind of trust. The last night of heat broke in thunder. Ashen climbed the ridge and stood where the wind ran clean. Below, the cabin glowed small and certain, a lantern cupped in two human hands. He closed his eyes and knew both worlds at once, the roadless dark and the square of light that had taught him mercy. At first blue, he descended and brushed the door with his whiskers. It gave. Evelyn sat with a blanket and a pencil tucked in her hair. "If you're staying, there's room," she said. "If you're going, there's grace." Ashen stepped inside, circled once, and lay facing the open door, guarding both choices until morning. He smelled the forest still clinging to his coat, the edge of something changing. She smiled through tired eyes. "You always come back," she said. For now, he did. If this story touched your heart, just drop a 1 in the comments, or a 0 if it stayed quiet inside you. Don't forget to subscribe. There are more gentle stories waiting just beyond the trees.